Welcome back, everybody. We're doing another fun episode of Indie Reads Aloud. This is so much fun. We are at episode 228. We're getting close to that next mile marker, so I'm super, super excited. I'm very grateful to all the authors who have come on the program. We've really learned a lot about the variances in writing, and we've been exposed to some amazing stories. So thanks, everybody, for continuing to come back. Today on the program, P.A. White is here, and she's going to be reading from her brand new book. Hi, Trisha. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
I'm super excited for you as a debut novelist to have your new book out. I remember the first time I had my first book out, and quite frankly, every time I release a new book, it's just as fun. How has this been for you? What's been the most impactful moment about being a debut author?
Uh, well, I cried like a baby when I got my proof copy in the mail because holding the physical book is. Uh, I didn't have kids, but I have a feeling that that's kind of, how somebody feels when they have a baby. It's like all that struggle to get it out. And then when you get to hold it. So when I got to hold it in my hands, I just cried and cried and, held it to my chest like, oh, I did it. I did it. So that was a big moment. And then more recently, because my book just came out in April, um, so I've been doing readings and signings and book festival, and also trying to get reviews and that kind of stuff. So more recently, it's the feedback. When somebody gives you a review and you can tell that it hit them the way I meant it to hit them. Like
Yeah.
there are parts where I really slowed down when I was writing it and was very conscious about I want them to be with me and to be with that character in that scene. I want them to be scared. I want them to be scared for me. And so when I get that feedback that they did feel that way, and this part made them scared, and this part creeped them out, and this character creeped them out, and this part made them cry, because I knew when I was writing it, that's how I want you to feel. And so if I was combing through it and editing and changing stuff, it was because I was refining it and trying to get it to that point. So knowing that it did, I recently had a reviewer who said there were times I had to put the book down just so I could breathe.
Oh, yeah. That's the
Right?
best kind of review to get.
Right?
Absolutely.
And other people,
Especially for a thriller genre.
yeah,
That's like gold right there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so exactly. I was like, that's like catnip to a writer
Oh,
that
yeah.
I moved you so much. And other people, have said I couldn't put it down because I didn't want to leave her alone. And that's again,
That's a really impactful review. Yeah.
that's the home run.
That's kind of like a moonshot when you get
Yeah,
something like that. That's
yeah.
wonderful. Well, I'm so
So
glad that your debut experience is turning out so well.
yeah, yeah.
That's very exciting.
I've been really pleased with it, and it's still surreal to think
Mm.
that someone else is reading my book. Like it's one thing when I had friends and coworkers and colleagues and people beta read it for me, but when a total stranger, when you know that a total stranger is reading your story, it's just surreal. It's like
Yeah.
they're climbing around in your head,
Yes.
and you're scaring them and you're making them cry, and so it's just been, those are things that I wanted but didn't know that I would get to experience. So I'm loving it.
And that's for me anyway, that's the addictive part of writing.
Oh sure, I can see that.
That's the thing that keeps me writing more is because I love that feedback and I love that people have the opportunity to run barefoot through my brain, which they don't get to do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah,
When you
yeah,
sit down with a novel and you spend, 3 hours every night for a week reading, you really become intimately involved with your readers, and it's a really great feeling.
yeah. Yep, I agree.
So the book you're going to read for us today is titled Until I Come Back for You. And
Yes.
it that alone is a pretty creepy title. Um, and then I read the synopsis and I thought, okay. I read the first three sentences. I'm just gonna read this because I want to share it with people before you do your selections.
Please do.
Trisha is a typical 8-year-old. The youngest of five, she has a pony, a BFF, sticky fingers, and a big secret. After she does her homework and chores, she sneaks off to visit a dead body in the woods, right where she left it. I read that and I thought, okay, I got to put this list on this book on my TBR list because just that alone caught me.
Good.
And then as I read further into your bio information and I saw this was based on true events, I
Yes.
thought, okay, there's an even bigger story involved here. And
Yes.
now I'm super, super curious about the scenes that you're going to read for us. Um, can you, without giving too much away, can you give us an overview of the story and your main character?
Yes. This is based on a true story from my childhood. The whole book is set in Michigan. So if you have Michigan readers out there who, kind of want to feel that I'm at home in this book, you're going to feel at home in this book.
That
Um,
sense of familiarity, right?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And it's set in my childhood, which was the 1970s, which I have recently been told is considered historical fiction. And I was like,
Well,
oh my
yes, because we're old now.
God, like my childhood is historical.
Yeah.
So yes, it's based on a true story from my childhood. In a nutshell, my sister and I were horse girls. We didn't have much, but as the teaser says, I had sticky fingers. I did love to steal, and so I stole some horse tack from a neighbor because he had a lot and we didn't have very much, and I just took it upon myself to steal some, and we kind of got in trouble for it. Um, and as I've been saying, in real life, we managed to get out of trouble. And in the book, we don't. And the
Yeah,
reason,
because it's much more fun.
exactly, exactly what we ended up doing in real life, we sneaked out of the house in the middle of the night and walked to his barn in the middle of the night, which in the country isn't, a neighbor can be 3 miles away. And
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
he was probably about 2 miles away. So these two little girls sneak out of the house in the middle of the night to return stolen goods. And this is all still true. We got to his house. We were trying to sneak into the barn to put the stuff in there because we were going to do the old switcheroo thing like, oh, no, 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 we didn't take it. It was always in there. You just
Yeah,
didn't
because you're going to
know.
give it back, right? Yeah.
Right. That's what we were
Right.
trying to do. And we
Yeah.
were just going to say it was there the whole time. You just didn't see it.
Yeah.
Um, and his dog started barking, and we were just kind of stuck, and then he came out on the porch with a gun and scared the
Wow.
bejesus out of us.
Well, yeah.
And so in real life, what we did was we dropped the stuff in a ditch and we ran home. And my whole adult life, I loved telling that story at dinner parties and all that kind of stuff. And, because I spent most of my adult life in a city with a lot of people who grew up in the city. And when I would tell this story, it was so entertaining. And I noticed people were, oh, little girls, and
Yeah.
after a while, it occurred to me that it wasn't so much fun to tell that story because of what happened. They were doing this because of what could have happened.
Sure, because they were imagining where the next
Right.
step might take you. The man
Right.
walks out onto his porch with a gun, and your
These
imagination runs wild, right?
Right. So I just thought, well, why don't I write that story? That's much more interesting. And, the boogeyman that's in your head is way scarier than anything I could ever write. So let's take that, what they're imagining, and try to put that on paper.
What a
So
great idea. I love that you take an event from your history as a jump point
yeah,
for a fictional story. I think that's fantastic.
it was it made it a lot easier because I didn't have to write the setting from scratch because it was just where I grew up. So I
Sure.
didn't have to describe a house that I didn't know. I didn't have to create a home. I just described mine. I didn't have to create the road.
Yeah, yeah, it's not like world building for science fiction.
Exactly,
Right? Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
It was all there. And all of the names are changed in the book except my family. My brothers and sisters all agreed they're totally okay with me using their real names, which, anybody would have figured out anyway. So, I didn't have to create those characters. They were already created. I just had to describe them as I saw them through my eyes at 5, at 6, at 7, at 8.
Sure.
And so I just fictionalized a real story and, just let it fly, you know.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, taking off the proverbial reins, right? You just let
Yes.
that horse go.
Yes.
Uh, that we as horse people know that the minute you take that saddle off, they're gone.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm super excited to hear you have 3 different selections.
Yes.
So I'm super excited. I just, like I say, when I was preparing for the program today and reading the show notes, I thought this is going to be an interesting read. And as I've said ad nauseum on the program, I'm just a recovering 6-year-old, and I love it when people read out loud to me. So I'm very excited about this program. So when you
Good.
are ready, Trisha, please take the microphone and read aloud.
Okay, great. I'm going to read 3 sections from the book today. I'm going to start with chapters 1 and 2, which, don't worry, it's not that long. They're very short chapters, but it just kind of gets you in place. And then I'm going to go to kind of the middle of the story and then a little bit towards the more interesting part of the more thrilling part of the story.
Super.
So, chapter 1, April 1973. Mommy? Yes, darling. When we move to our new house, will we still be on top of the world? Yes, darling. At 5, my understanding of the earth and my place on it was based largely on the big blue National Geographic globe in the living room. My understanding of the big blue globe was based largely on whatever my 4 older, wiser siblings taught me. If one of them learned about China in school that day, they would show me where China is. If they learned to count in Spanish, they would teach me to count in Spanish and show me where Spain is. Every time I would ask, and where are we? With one of my little fingers on the new country, they would put my other finger on America, each state a different pastel color. Okay, now where's Michigan? They would ask. Right there. Michigan is the easiest to find because it's shaped like a mitten. And each time I saw it, I took comfort in knowing we were on top of the world where we couldn't fall off. At 5, I knew just enough about gravity to know it could be your friend or your enemy, but I didn't understand how people below the equator didn't fall off. There were some sleepless nights worrying about the people of Australia and Brazil clinging on for dear life. My theory was that that's why koala bears hold on to trees and monkeys have prehensile tails. So when my mom told us we were moving from our house in Detroit to a farm in the country, my first concern was for our safety, gravity wise. Karen and Mary went to the globe. See the mitten? Karen asked. Yeah, I responded. Don't say yeah, dear, Mom corrected. So where are we? Mary asked, pointing to Detroit with her pencil. Yeah, I replied. We're moving to about here, she said, pointing to the unmarked space at the bottom of the mitten, the nondescript open frontier between Detroit and Chicago, just above where Indiana and Ohio border each other. I was relieved to know we wouldn't be losing much latitude. If you grow up in Michigan, the most important lesson in geography goes something like this. Hold up your right hand, fingers together, like you're swearing an oath. This is Michigan. Point to your hometown and say, I'm from insert hometown here. For the rest of your life, when you leave Michigan and someone asks you where you're from, you'll say Michigan reflexively, hold up your mitten, and point to your hometown. To help non-Michiganders better understand, you'll follow that with the distance in hours, not miles, and direction from Detroit. Kalamazoo, 2 hours due west of Detroit. Frankenmuth, an hour and a half north of Detroit. Unless you're from Detroit. Heck, everyone knows where that is. Catherine held up her right hand. Trisha, hold up your hand, point to where we are. Where is Detroit? I pointed proudly. She took my finger and pointed and moved it about an inch west. There. That's where we're going. That's Pittsford. There it was, right in my hand. Dan, the oldest and only boy, pulled out Daddy's road atlas and spread it on the floor. Here, dummy. This is where we're moving, the middle of nowhere. Daniel, it is not, Mom said. You're going to love it there. You'll make new friends. There won't be any girls there. There will be girls there. Ugly ones, he said under his breath. Nice ones, Mom said. Not like those fresh girls at your school. And cute boys? Mary asked. You girls don't need to be thinking about boys, Mary Adrene, Mom said, looking over her glasses. Mom, will there be horses? Asked Catherine. Yes, Katie Catherine, there are horses in Pittsford. Chapter 2. Dan was wrong. If nowhere has a geographical dead center, Pittsford, Michigan isn't quite it. Pittsford is one of 8 towns and villages that make up Hillsdale County, the southernmost point in the state. The region was settled by immigrants with three or more syllables in their names, like Van Arsdale, Davenport, and Trumbauer. Lured by fertile soil, fresh water, abundant timber, and game, all for $1.25 an acre, they traveled from New England to Detroit. Covered wagons then carried them west on Sauk Trail, a prehistoric path originally cut by woolly mammoths, inured by Indians, and now known as Highway US 12. Even today, almost 200 years after the first European set foot there, you can see the history in their faces, passed down through generations of families who settled and stayed there. The dirt under their nails is the same rich soil that fed tribes and settlers alike, the earth that absorbed the spilled blood of outlaws, and the dust from streets of once bustling railroad towns now long gone. Don't be surprised if you meet someone whose last name is also the name of a road or a landmark, and they're not even a snob about it. When people say it's a good place to raise a family, they're talking about places like Pittsford. Nothing bad ever happens there. Fields of corn, soy, and alfalfa in every direction, with soil so dark and rich, it's like walking on warm chocolate cake. Dairy farms and pastures of fat Holsteins grazing in the sun, swishing away flies with their long white tails. The crack of a bat at a church softball game can be heard a mile away. This would become my hometown, witness to my life, setting to my story, and nothing bad happens here. Fast forward, July 3rd, 1976, so we've jumped a little bit. Our 4-H club had been preparing for the bicentennial, 4th of July parade for 4 months. WCSR, our local radio station, was giving a $50 prize to the best dressed group, and we were going for it. We had 4 founding fathers, 6 revolutionary soldiers, 1 Martha Washington, and 2 Paul Revere's. The rest of us were just decked out all in red, white, and blue, from our hat bands to the ribbons in our horses' tails. Mom made matching flag vests for Catherine and me. The night before the parade, we were in the barn cleaning and prepping tack. Catherine was cleaning Dusty's bridle when the buckle on the headstall gave out again, the prong falling in the dust at her feet. Dang it, Catherine said. I don't know how many more times I can fix this thing. Can you get me some binder twine and scissors? Sure. In the tack room, I picked around for the scissors, pilfered from Mom's sewing stuff. Where are my Fiskars? She would yell from another room. Which one of you kids took my Fiskars? These are not toys. These are not for playing with. They're very expensive. Then she'd mumble something about how she can never have nice things. Catherine managed to fix the bridle, but couldn't hide the twine. That looks pretty hillbilly, she said. Can you find a little piece of wire? Sure. When I came back, I lowered a brand new bridle onto her lap. tanned leather with real buck stitching on each side and a silver plate on the brow band. "What's this?" she asked. "A new bridle." "Where did you get it?" she asked, looking around. "It's not my birthday." "I took it." "You what?" "I borrowed it." "Wait, is this Mr. Clark's?" I nodded. "You took it?" I nodded. "When? How?" "Remember that day I brought you lunch and helped you clean the tack barn?" I told you not to take anything." "I know, but what? This is stealing, Trisha." "But he has so much and he doesn't use it. And, well, we need it." "That doesn't make it right. It's still stealing. It's a sin." "Sorry." "Well, I have to take this back. Hopefully he hasn't noticed it's gone." "He hasn't noticed. It's been gone for months." "Trisha, that's a sin." "Won't hurt to use it for the parade, right?" "I can't do that." "If you take it back, it's not stealing, just borrowing." "It's not borrowing if you didn't ask permission." "No one will know, and you'll put it back before anyone does know." "It's still a sin." "Seems like more of a sin to flash your money all around and brag and buy all that nice stuff just to leave it to rot in his barn." "That's for God to judge." For more than a few minutes, we stood holding the bridle, touching the stitching, studying the silver plate, running the long, supple reins through our fingers. "It's really pretty, isn't it?" I said. "Trisha, I'm not using it tomorrow. It's wrong." "Yeah," I said. "It couldn't hurt to just try it on him, though, right?" she asked. She adjusted the buckle and slipped it over Dusty's head. The sun caught the silver band on his forehead, flashing us in the eyes. If you didn't know better, you'd never know the bit in his mouth was worth more than the whole horse. "Looks good on him," I said. "Yeah, it does," she said. And now I will skip towards the end. Not the end, but chapter 43, Evolving. You might say Ronnie Clark was my first love. I was drawn to him, obsessed, like picking a scab or the way your tongue can't stop bothering a sore in your mouth. I needed to see him in that hole. I needed to know he was still there, still dead, still mine, only mine. I would lie to my mom and sneak away to be with him, as if we were having an affair, always under the pretense of visiting Becky Lynn. I would ride to Christmas Tree Hill, my head on a swivel to make sure no one saw me. If I was caught, I had excuses at the ready. "I thought I heard a kitten crying over there," or "I'm looking for my hat I dropped when we were sledding last winter." But no one ever caught me. Sometimes I would imagine that he would be sitting up when I got there, smoking a cigarette, waiting for me. Or worse, the hole would be empty and he was hiding in the trees over my head, just like I hid from him that night. But he was always there and always dead. Don't get me wrong, Ronnie Clark was full of surprises. The first few visits, I would lie on my belly at the edge of the hole and poke him with a stick. The branches and grass had settled into more of a blanket than a roof over him. His outline was there, but everything was under cover except one orange screaming eagle boot sticking out. I needed to feel him, but I didn't want to see him. Not yet. You can forget how something feels, but never how it looks. Lots of things feel like a dead body, but nothing else looks like it. At Halloween time, the older kids would let me help make scarecrows for decoration. We would take some of Daddy's old clothes and fill them with straw, use a pumpkin for the head, and put him in a lawn chair in the front yard. Daddy would come home and yell at us for ruining his good clothes. We would laugh and say they were his ratty old clothes and he didn't wear them anymore. He would pretend to be mad and say they were his favorites. He didn't wear them anymore because he was saving them for special occasions. When I poked Ronnie Clark's legs, I was half expecting him to be a scarecrow, that someone had replaced his body with straw, or that he had filled his own clothes with grass and leaves and was wandering around naked looking for me. After a while, Ronnie Clark started getting other visitors. One day, a mama raccoon and her babies were in the hole with him, dining on the maggots and beetles that were dining on Ronnie Clark. Mama hissed at me, and the babies huddled, tumbling over each other and chittering. I thought about petting them, but my fear of rabies kept me at a distance. Well, not rabies so much as rabies shots. Playground mythos said that if you got bit by a wild animal, you had to get 100 rabies shots in your stomach. His other visitors weren't as kind as I was. Some didn't even bother to cover him back up after their visit. Someone made a fast meal of his forearm, leaving the tendons and bones exposed and drying in the sun. That summer, we had a huge storm, dropping about a foot of rain over a few days. The creeks were at max flow, roads and fields were flooded. When I got to him, Ronnie Clark was floating in his hole like a cracker face down in a bowl of soup. The skin on his back was black, mottled with gray and purple. Ligaments, tendons, and bones were all that was left of his arms. His jeans were sun-bleached and threadbare. Ronnie Clark was evolving. And that's it.
Okay, that's a little creepy, I got to admit. that is just a little creepy. What did you find was the most challenging part? Not of the publishing, not of the editing, but of the writing. What was the most challenging part of putting this story onto paper?
Writing the beginning.
How so?
Because I knew where I wanted to go. I knew where the sort of the crescendo in the middle was, you know, how a story arc is.
Sure.
But I couldn't figure out where to start because a big part of the story is my family's history and how we left Detroit. We went to the country. And because you have to know that, you have to be able to put that in context because so much of the story isn't going to make sense if you start from us being on a farm, because then you're going to think, oh, well, they were farmers and we weren't. And there's a lot of, I mean, there's so much funny material of, you know, the city folks going to the country.
Sure, that transplantation process is interesting.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And we lived that. And I was like, those are some good stories. And you need that context to know, to understand us. So where do I start? Do I start, you know, when my parents grew up in Detroit or when we left or, you know, so I just had a really hard time landing on that. And when I did, it was like, oh, and I wanted it to be kind of a quirky moment to make the reader say, what is this about? Because, you know, you're coming into it having read that teaser. What is this, you know? Yeah. So I think that was the hardest part for us, landing the ending, fine. All of the middle was fine, but finding a starting point was so hard, so hard.
Wow. Okay, cool. I know we talked in the green room that this is your debut novel and you're not quite sure if you're going to write another or not yet. And we all have that question as a debut novelist, you know, do I write another one? Is this just a bucket list? Am I done? And then at least for me, I got infected and then the rest is history. But if there was a character in this book that you would like to make another book for them, making them the character of that next book, who would that be and why?
Easy, my mom. And when you read this, the first thing that you're going to notice about maybe 5 or 6 chapters in is it's almost as much about her as it is about me. Because again, you have to know her. And the reason I tell so many stories about her, true stories, you see that my story doesn't make sense without hers. My mom was very smart, very charming. I say she was happy but not content. And that her generation of women they didn't get a choice of what they wanted to do, really. Right. You know, there just weren't a lot of, it's not that women didn't, you know, sort of venture out of the traditional expectations, but my mom did not do that. So she had kids instead of a career. She had a house instead of an office. And so she was restless, I guess.
Mm.
But she didn't know that, and she would never, ever, ever have admitted that. But her story is so interesting. And, and then again, her mother, so my grandmother, who you also meet in the book, her story is really fascinating. And her mother, so my grandmother was conceived in Europe and born here. So, that
Wow.
whole,
Okay.
yeah. So,
Yeah, that's a story in and of itself.
right. Her mother was escaping World War One. She was in German occupied France in a place called Alsace-Lorraine, and was pregnant with my grandma, and escaped. Her husband stayed behind because he was going to, come behind and follow her. And he was a lumberjack, and he ended up getting killed. A tree fell on him before he had a chance to get out. So it's like all of the women in my family that came before me, their stories are the stories of America in a lot of ways.
Sure. Yeah,
And
yeah.
then you see how our family is the story of America, but also the story of Michigan and people moving around in Michigan for different reasons, especially in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So that's my long answer to your short question. I would love to tell my mom's story, but I would have to, again, start with what I know of the truth, because my mom's gone now. She passed in January, and then fictionalize the rest, which would be, easy to do because she's a really good starting point.
It's a really rich character there with lots of fun things that you could interject. Yeah.
When you meet her in here, like I actually have had readers say that story can't be true because no mother would do that. Why didn't she scream?
Okay.
Why didn't she? And that's an absolutely true story from my mom's life. I don't know that I made up a whole lot about her because I didn't need to. She was so complex and
She
so,
was already a complex and dynamic character. You didn't really have to create a lot.
yes, and there were so many
Yeah.
contradictions, and so I needed to show those different facets of her. And I almost kind of liked it when people would say that wasn't believable because no one would ever do that. No mom would ever do that. No woman would ever do that. And I could look at them and say, "Yep, she absolutely
Right.
did."
Right. No, that's super fun. So now I hope I've planted an earwig that says you have 2 more books to write. Because I believe everybody has stories and we just need to get them out. So,
Yeah.
one last question before I let you go. Where can readers find you the rest of this year? Are you going to be doing more events? Can they, I have your website in the show notes for this episode. Do you have your events listed on your website so people can find you?
Yes, if you go to my link tree, I do a good job, hopefully a good job, of keeping my events listed in there. I can tell you right now, on the Saturday the 19th, I will be here in Port Sanilac, and on the 26th, I will be in Midland, Michigan, at Bookmarks, and that's,
Fabulous.
yeah. And I think that's all I have for a while.
Awesome. Okay,
But
so we'll come out and look for you. And in the meantime, anybody listening can go to the show notes and they can find links to your book and links to your website so they can learn more about you and maybe nudge you a little bit to write the next book.
I
Thank
can
you
handle that.
thank you so much for coming on the program. I'm really, really grateful, and I've added your book to my TBR, so I appreciate
Great.
that.
Great.
Thank you
Thank you
so
for having
much.
me. I love talking about my book. So anytime.
Oh, no, you're welcome. And when you write the next one, come on back and we'll do this all over again.
Okay, great.
Have a great day.
You too. Thanks.